yeah, it's a nice kind of pretty calm, hopeful way, I hope, to end the record.
Hello, how are you?
Howdy.
It's good to see you both. So back in Love City, I mean, I love the way you just get on with it. So you give us the title track, you set the store out straight away, and this is always the great thing about the vaccines. There's no messing about. And tell us about Love City. Is it a real place?
I suppose anything that exists in the mind is real to a degree, right? I think I'm glad you said it was a no messing opener. I think comparatively it's probably quite like a low key album opener. But I think as soon as we sort of wrote this song and kind of this phrase fell out of my mouth, we knew we wanted to kind of build this city and build this world. And it felt straight away like it would probably be the name of the album, and then also, you know, it would kind of open the album too. And I think we're still sort of debating or expanding on what Love City might look like and where it might be and all that sort of stuff. But I suppose, like any kind of emotion, it's going to be different for different people, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, were you inspired by particular things that informed the idea of creating something like Love City?
I mean, I wasn't really sure what it meant when it first came to me, but you know, this song in particular, I'm always like taken back to this road trip I took with some friends where we drove from San Francisco to Vegas, and we kind of arrived just as the sort of sun was going down and the moon was coming up and the neon lights were sort of being fired up. And I sort of, you know, we'd spent all day kind of driving across the desert, and I sort of think of this song as maybe being the last song on the playlist or the first song as you drive into the city, this kind of like, you know, this twilight golden hour accompaniment. But I'm not really sure. Yeah, again, I think it's sort of, I'm not a particular place, but maybe, you know, an array of places or, I don't know, emotions. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like the idea of Love City being a kind of, I mean, just like Justin said, it's going to be different for everyone. And we kind of play with this idea of, you know, what if love is the kind of dominant commodity in the future, in the same way that you know, technology is becoming so good at giving us some of what we need, and it to some extent infantilizes us, and we forget how to do things we used to be able to do, like read a map and stuff like that. And so what if, like, and this is kind of where my thread goes to it. What if in the future you have like Apple Love, Amazon Love, and you were able to buy this emotion, which kind of just makes everything okay, you know? And of course, when you were doing that, that would look like something very different for each person that was accessing it. But, you know, it kind of just, the song came first, and then, you know, Justin and I had like a long talk on a flight, and that developed it a bit, and we've all had our own kind of journey with it, and more songs came along, and it was quite nice to be writing around a kind of fictional location, even though it didn't have to be a kind of set thing.
I also think we now sort of live in a world where, you know, we're reminded all the time that everything is finite, and also because of the ways we connect and interact and all that sort of stuff, things feel like increasingly binary, and even the English language is quite sort of I suppose binary and reductive when it uses words like love and hate and hope and despair and anxiety and excitement and depression and ecstasy and whatever that may be. But they're actually, you know, they're not on, off, black, white, good, bad. You know, they're actually like different things for different people at any given moment in any given place. And so it was interesting to kind of explore emotion as something that was maybe as simple as we're used to kind of expressing it increasingly now, I think.
Yeah. And does it inform the rest of the album? Is the whole album set in that world, or is that just an underlying
Yeah, loosely,
theme?
I think it became a sort of guiding principle. I think that, like, definitely when we were making it, we weren't thinking of it as a concept record necessarily. I think, like, now we've come to talk about it as much as we have over the last few weeks, and maybe it is to a certain extent. We're sort of being confronted with that a bit, but yeah, it was sort of it became this kind of nice umbrella for all the strongest material to kind of exist under, if that makes sense. And yeah, like a sort of guiding principle more than a concept. And I
it's
think,
like a north star, really.
Yeah, and I think, loosely speaking, most of the best music that came, or the stuff we were most excited about after we'd written that song, kind of felt like it could exist in that world.
You went to Texas to record this record, and I wondered whether the title of A Lone Star was informed by the Lone Star State in any way, or was that a kind of subliminal thing?
Yeah, no. In this case, that was a nice kind of like play on. That was like a tip of the cap. El Paso, which I guess we'll come on to, kind of came, but there was some nice serendipity because El Paso was not, in fact, an ode to where we'd recorded. It was just what we named the file at the end of the day, because we were flying to El Paso the next morning to then cross the border into Juarez to play a festival. But in the case of A Lone Star, it was actually, A Lone Star is a very old song. We demoed it and re-demoed it and re-demoed it again. We first wrote it for English Graffiti, our third record. Then we tried it again for Combat Sports, our fourth record. And this was like a kind of third time lucky situation. And it was perhaps more appropriately called You're Not Alone for the first 5 years of its life. And then
it's quite funny. It was in the maybe pile, and I have the board still, like the album recording board with all the names of the songs, and it was something that, like, personally I wasn't really very interested in working on, and our managers and the producer was like,
more importantly, it was Daniel Ladinsky who heard all the big pile of songs and was like, there's something in that, let's try and like crack the code.
So that there was a kind of mini studio that he had in like an outbuilding, because it was all done just to set the scene a bit. It was recorded in a studio called Sonic Ranch, which is an old cattle farm, which is now a pecan farm, which is just acres and acres of pecan trees on the Mexican Texan border. Like, it literally has the border wall on the studio property. Anyway, so he was in the kind of B studio, and he just emerged every kind of half day or something and play us where he got to with it. And it, like Justin said, it really, this was a song that was really, really informed by the environment and kind of went through a lot of changes, and it developed into something completely different by the end of the session. And now it's one of my, so gone from not wanting to record it, now it's probably my favorite song on the album.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I love the combination of sounds in it, and also the combination of machinery. So there are a lot more programmed beats on it than you would expect from the Vaccines. And
there's also that kind of Eddie Cochran sort of rockabilly style guitar riff and stuff. So I think it sort of has one foot in the past and one foot in the present or future, whatever. And I think actually one of the reasons it comes so early on the record is because I think it sort of has that Vaccines DNA at its core, but it maybe also kind of sets out the MO for the record as well.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it got me really excited when I heard it, because I thought, hang on a minute, they're doing something different here. And was that the decision approaching this record, that you wanted to do something different?
I think we've always wanted to have that decision. It's just that I don't think you can just get together and say, okay, we want to maintain some of our sound, but we also want to modernize it and want to. We've always had that intention. It's just that having the intention doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think you can sort of sit down at the beginning of any sort of creative process and say, okay, well, this is where we are right now, and this is what we want to get. This is where we want to get to. But the path doesn't always present itself, and I think sometimes you have to kind of chop through all the thick vegetation, and you might get to the end of the process and still be completely lost. And that's not necessarily to say you're going to end up with a record that's 10 times worse than if you knew where you were. But I think we've always tried to stay interesting and stay interested and kind of evolve as a band, whilst at the same time kind of retaining what it is we do well. But I don't think we've always necessarily, the path hasn't always necessarily presented itself to us. And I actually think whether or not we're right or wrong, the world will soon be able to judge. I think on this record, we felt very much like we were taking big steps forward, but we were bringing with us all the best stuff about the Vaccines.
Totally, I agree. And Headphones Baby is another instant hit as far as I'm concerned, and it seems to be the essence of Vaccine's ideas. You know, I do wonder whether you approach every song with the same aim, because it almost seems to me as if, you know, you want to make sure that you have all these different ammo in each song, you know, the hooks, the choruses, the sing-along moments, the amazing guitar sounds. Do you approach it in that way? I mean, do you have a list of things that you've got to tick off for a Vaccine song?
I'm not sure necessarily a list, but I suppose there are things, you know, you're drawn to as a music fan, and then as an artist, and then as a member of a band. And I think that, you know, euphoria is definitely a word that I like keep coming back to when I think about my favorite Vaccine songs, or the kind of most enduringly popular, or the best, or whatever. And you know, like I've seen a few comments where people sort of suggest this is our kind of the most pop thing we've ever released. But I remember when we first wrote If You Wanna, and I sung the chorus out loud, we all kind of laughed because we thought it was so pop. And I actually think that we've always had like hooks at the kind of core of what we do, and that's pretty much always been like the first thing that's come, and then we've tried to kind of beef them up and given them some depth with some sort of heavier sounds, and then some maybe slightly more meaningful lyrics, and just kind of off the cuff whatever. And there's always like this kind of happy, sad, like light, dark kind of thing going on with all of our songs, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's also just a combination of personnel in the band, and there are just some traits that we probably don't even notice, because that's to a large extent our experience in the studio. But I think impatience is one, kind of like almost a bit attention deficit, like perfectionism, like this kind of group energy that's created. You know, things have to be done properly, have to be done relatively quickly, they have to be exciting. There's just, I think it's the personalities that play that kind of turn out music that sounds like this.
Yeah. And do you think it's had a change shift with 5 people in the band now?
It's absolutely, yeah. It's definitely, you know, it's definitely a really good, well balanced mix of like characters and sort of like creative, I guess, characters. It feels like a really good and healthy balance, and I think we all complement each other really well. And I think that, you know, being in a band, you're kind of 4 or 5, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of a puzzle, and I definitely think that as a 5-piece we really kind of, you know, we fit well together.
Wanderlust is the next song, and this seems the kind of loudest and fuzziest track on the record.
Certainly fuzzy.
It's very fuzzy, and then it has a kind of Latin trumpet break in it as well. I love these combinations.
I don't know. I'm not really sure what else to add. I think it's, you know, I think that Vaccines have always been, you know, kind of brash and frenetic and unleashed and stuff, but not necessarily heavy. And I would argue that there's actually maybe slightly heavier moments on this record, but to date, I think if you're listening to the record chronologically, this might be the heaviest thing you've heard the Vaccines do. But again, just, you know, to reference that kind of Latin trumpet moment, I think it does kind of fit in the kind of tapestry of Back in Love City and Sonic Ranch, and this kind of, you know, Morricone indie rock that we were sort of like joking about aiming for.
I love
slightly
that.
Cinematic too, maybe.
Yeah, I love that little soundbite.
Yeah.
Morricone indie rock. You can get that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
It was really a funny bit of trivia about recording this is Arnie, my bass player, made me a fuzz pedal for my birthday, and I was packing out all my gear to go to Texas to record the record, and I thought, it's probably going to be rubbish. It might not even work, so I'm not going to bother bringing it. And then I turned around and I thought, no, it's really rude, actually. I should just bring it just so he knows that I brought it, just out of politeness. And actually, when we got there, plugged it in, it was the most amazing sounding fuzz pedal. And it's quite difficult, I think, to actually make fuzz sound like something you haven't really heard before. But So the sound on Wanderlust is this pedal that Arnie handmade me. And it really, every time I hear it, it gets me super excited. It was something I listened to this song so much during lockdown because it was such a kind of fantasy about, wow, one day we'll be on stage again together and we're going to play it and it's going to be awesome.
That's so great. Did he give the fuzz pedal a name?
I have named it Bumble Beast because it has like a bee in a can, but it's also quite massive.
Good name, Bumble Beast.
Yeah,
Bumble Beast. Yeah.
And you kind of wrong foot us there slightly on this track as it starts, in a kind of spectral ballad form, and then suddenly races off in this amazing gallop. And it's like, so many people seem to have a default setting when they write songs. It seems that the ballad and the mid-paced number seem to be default and almost like an easy thing to do. And often people say writing something upbeat is the real challenge. And yet, so much of what you do as the Vaccines is completely upbeat. And one of the things that we love about you just don't let us sit or relax. You just keep us on our feet, jumping up and down.
I increasingly find upbeat songs difficult to write, and I think that's not just about being a time and place in your life. I think it's that, like, I think maybe it's because they're also inherently they're often so inherently kind of like simple and simplistic and stuff that you sort of have to like trick yourself into finding them interesting and fresh. And there's quite, I'd say 9 times out of 10 when I write an upbeat song now, I really don't like it because I feel like I've heard it before and I feel like I've sung it before. So I'm always really happy when one gets through the net and I'm like, oh, I sort of, I've tricked myself into thinking that's something we haven't done before. And I'm Paranormal Romance, probably a good example of that, because to use that word again, it is sort of very cinematic and, like you say, galloping, and it does feel like a sort of maybe like a different side to the band, and it takes you on a bit of a journey. This song, interestingly enough, was written after we got back from Sonic Ranch and we started thinking about the next record, and as a result of that have a bunch of new material, but this just felt like it existed in Love City, and it felt like it would be a shame not to put it on the record, so we recorded it last year. And I think it's an infinitely better record for having it on there, actually.
So it's quite ironic that we sorry, Joe, that we recorded this in, I think it was 4 different countries in our home studios. When it was allowed, Johan went to Iceland, they recorded the rhythm section. I was in Scotland, Justin was in London, Tim was at home in Australia, and we kind of pieced it all together. But it's the kind of irony that it became the most cinematic. It's got an opera singer on it, but it actually was done in the home studios.
Actually, it's got Ray Morris on it, who I wouldn't call an opera singer.
She's an amazing singer.
She is very operatic.
She's an amazing singer. She's kind of doing the operatic Morricone thing. But yes, you're right, Ray Morris. You're not an opera singer. And we're very grateful to have you on the record.
So is she's on Paranormal Romance. Is she on other tracks as well?
Yeah, she's on a Lone Star too. And I think, is that it?
Yeah, I think so.
Friars basically did some additional and post-production on about half of the record, and they are married, and so she ended up singing on a couple of the songs for us. Yeah. He was in session recently on the show, actually, and they've just had a baby, haven't they? So we should say congratulations to them. Yes, indeed.
Congratulations.
El Paso is track 6, the next song, and this has a bit of a dance feel to it, I think, almost.
Yeah, I suppose it has got, again, that sort of slightly like Latin groove, but I'm not sure that was necessarily intentional. In fact, it was sort of Friars who added that, actually. But so this first sort of like, this was first birthed, as it were, in LA, and as I said, we were flying to El Paso the next day to then cross the border and play a festival in Juarez. And Daniel Ladinsky, who produced the record, who I actually wrote this song with, had been talking about Sonic Ranch in El Paso earlier on or just outside of El Paso earlier on in the day. And I said, oh, that's really weird. We're flying to El Paso tomorrow. And so we named the song El Paso at the end of the day, just because we didn't have anything else to name it. And so there was a bit of serendipity that kind of, 6-9 months later or whatever, we were in Sonic Ranch recording this song. And yeah, I think it's I don't know, I actually walked to the gas station to get some aspirin, I think, halfway through the day, because I was feeling dizzy, and I wrote all the lyrics like on my phone notes, like on the way there and on the way back in about 10 minutes. And I don't really know where they came from, but certainly when I was first kind of listening back to this, or singing it and listening back to the song, I felt like kind of very moved by them and attached to them. And someone actually the other day asked me, if I was to be one song on the record, what would it be? And I definitely feel more like the protagonist in this song than in many other songs. But I think I'm proud of this one. I really like it.
Yeah, it was also another nice bit of trivia of the record is that guitar that was in the studio, the song was written on, was a nylon string that belonged to Elliott Smith.
So they
say. And when then to Justin and the band, they flew into El Paso and crossed the wires. But at that time, my partner and I were in Mexico City, and we spent a couple of months there, and that for me was like highly influential for the sound of the record and how I wanted to approach the record and the kind of aesthetic. And so it was all, I wouldn't say happy accidents, but it was definitely the kind of timing of it was all very synchronized.
Yeah, it sounds like it was meant to be. This
yeah,
idea.
Exactly, yeah.
I think we all felt like we were exactly where we were supposed to be, doing exactly what we were supposed to be doing, which is, which can't always be said.
Nope.
Yeah. Well, that's often what upsets things, isn't it? When things don't feel right because they're not meant to be necessarily. But here it all.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think obviously when you're in a band for however many years it's been now, we've definitely been to those periods where you feel like you're just trying to run through quicksand, and it just feels so difficult. And this record is probably the most effortless of any record we've made, for me personally. Just the most joyful, effortless. Anytime we came,
it's definitely
and also like the person you talk about the personnel, the lineup with the five of us as it is now, we just complement each other so well that whenever we come up against any difficulty or we hit like a musical iceberg or whatever, I don't know, whatever it is, the combination of us, we seem to just be able to keep moving forward all the time. So it's a real blessing.
What can you tell us about Jump Off the Top?
This is the song I'm most nervous about, because we entered into a contract with our fan base about 2.5 years ago when we started playing this live, and it fast became a bit of like a fan favorite live, and actually I would say it gets as good a response as many singles do every time we play it. And so I'm quite nervous for people to hear the recorded version. I really hope we haven't let them down and we've done it justice. It's the second time we recorded it. We originally recorded it at the same time as All My Friends Falling in Love, which is a standalone single we did in 2018. And actually we didn't end up putting it out because it didn't sort of feel right. Not necessarily that we weren't into the recording, but just didn't work out. So yeah, this is a slightly older song with a bit of a history. And I suppose in many respects sort of classic back scenes, which is why people might have connected to it when we do play it live. So yeah, I hope people dig it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. And there be a lot of excitement about finally it being recorded and on a record.
Yeah, that is the one sort of that is the one song that gets quite a lot of social media comments and posts and replies are concerning that song.
The next song is XCT. What is XCT?
Well, XCT is X City, which is why it opens, I guess, the traditional side 2 or whatever. If you thought it was kind of silly and funny, but I'd written down X City, and I sort of started to think about what Love City might look like if it was sort of abandoned or you know, falling down or dilapidated, I suppose, you know, the opposite of love or falling out of love or whatever it may be. And I guess that's why the song sounds so sort of brittle, maybe, and industrial, and maybe even quite unpleasant or something. I don't know. And it's like, you know, I guess in some respects it is classic Vaccines, but then it also sounds like a little like new metal in places, or like I say, a little industrial. And I don't know. It's like, it feels more like falling out, maybe sounds more like falling out of love than falling in love or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely rowdier and noisier. Is Arnie's Bumble Beast fuzz pedal on this as well?
I don't think it is, but it's quite interesting. It's hard. It's a really simple song, and I think simplicity is super powerful when it's done right. But I remember actually when we were working, All My Friends Are Falling in Love, we were in a really kind of dingy rehearsal studio, and we weren't really feeling it. And Justin said, "Guys, just play it if you want to. Like, you know, the song, we have all this history and all this proof about it being a great song, and play it and see." And it sounded like shit too. And actually, there's an element of kind of experience when it comes to recording things that are very, very simple, because, you know, you can be in a rehearsal studio and you can play these 3 chords and like, God, we just sound like a school band. It sounds rubbish. But actually, when you have the experience, you go to a studio, when you get that great guitar sound, and get that great drum sound, and get that great vocal take, and the simplicity is really, really powerful. I think it's one of the songs that really, kind of, hearing it back on the speakers, it was one of the high points of recording.
That's an interesting test, to go through an old song in a situation and see what that sounds like. And is it a way of saying, well, actually, maybe this situation isn't right? You know.
We're not big fans of rehearsing in the Vaccines, and when we do, we were rehearsing a couple of weeks ago for these shows we did, including the Radio X one, and, you know, it's the first time we'd been together for about 18 months. And on day 2, Arnie was just like, "Can we please stop rehearsing the old songs, because they're getting worse every time we do, because everybody is like so disconnected and disinterested, and it's like all muscle memory, and actually rehearsing them was making them worse." And yeah, none of the, you know, it's funny, like they have this kind of history, and when we're so sort of like deeply sort of connected to them, and other people are too, that when you play them live and you play them through like a big thunderous PA system, you know, people breathe life into them. But when you play them in these little rehearsal spaces, they all just, you know, they sound pretty tired. They sound like old cars or something. I don't know.
That's really interesting. And yet, you know, that show for Radio X at the Forum and these upcoming shows, I mean, a Vaccines rock and roll experience now, post-pandemic, you know, is ecstasy, isn't it? I mean, that, you know, it'll be so ecstatic.
that Radio X show really was, you know, it was something else. It felt like we'd all been let out of jail the day before, I think. Like, and when I say we, I mean everyone in the room. It was quite something, actually. We were flying after that.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I mean, I couldn't think of a better band to go and see for the first time post-pandemic. No, where everybody can just go absolutely crazy, and get infected by the vaccines. You know.
Oh yeah.
Excellent. And maybe this will be in the set list. Are you playing a lot of the new songs on this upcoming tour that you've got?
Yeah, and you know, I think that we sort of need to figure all that out. Absolutely, it'll be hopefully a healthy mix of new and old. When we were rehearsing for Latitude and the Radio X show, we actually had to. I think we got so excited we sort of had to hold back on a few, and that's actually a really great thing. And I think despite, you know, the record maybe having more kind of production and all that sort of stuff, and one thing we were really keen to kind of prioritize with the songs that we knew would work live and kind of work well within the kind of Vaccines world. And I think that, you know, the last time we sort of tried to make a sort of more heavily produced record was English Graffiti. And I think even though there were moments we're really proud of on that record, we kind of got to the end of the process and realized there was nothing that really worked live. And I think that that's such a big part of what we do, and it's what we spend 90% of our time doing, and it's really where people connect with us on a tangible level. And so I think what we really wanted with this record was to bring forward like an abundance of new music we could add to the set list, basically. So I think that, 75% of this I hope will work really well live, and we're very excited to play it.
Yeah, fantastic. So people could get ecstatic to XCT at the next Vaccine show.
He's Brilliant. Unstoppable.
Yes. I have got Freddie Cohen and Justin Young talking to me tonight, giving us the lowdown on the new record. And this seems to have kind of everything in it. Bandit. Now, is that a banjo at the start, or is that an acoustic guitar? There's a kind of disco element, or are these trade secrets?
It's a nylon string guitar. But I really like this song because and I really like other bands when a band has kind of defined what they're doing on the record, and it's usually on the second side of the album, and you know exactly what you're doing, and you're in the flow of it, and it's not going to be a single. It's just like a great album song, and like you said, it's got all the elements of the record on it. It's got that great sound, it's got a great riff, it's got the kind of Morricone middle 8 section. It's just super fun.
I think, to go back to one of your original questions, I think that this was, this definitely came at a time when we were writing with Love City, the sound and the place in mind, and we really felt like we were on a roll. And, I also was starting to think about this kind of like, these gangs of love and this kind of underworld and this underbelly, and so that was quite like a, like fun thing to sort of explore.
It's interesting. I think, I've got this formula in my mind of what you're doing with the Vaccines. That, I mean, you've mentioned Morricone indie rock, but also I think it's almost like the Ramones meets ABBA. Then somehow,
wow.
And I did wonder whether you've thought this through, whether this has been, because it's all the hooks that you get in the Ramones, all that energy, all the hooks that you get in ABBA, and all the amazing hooks that they have, combined.
I mean, that's a huge honor. And I think one of the reasons why we were compared to the Ramones when we first started was because they had this sort of like, I guess they had this sort of like punk rock sound, this quite like unleashed, frenetic, exciting sound. But all the music they were listening to was, the best sort of, pop, the biggest and best sort of pop music of the day. And that was just kind of their, that was their version of it. And I think that there's probably some parallels there. I wonder if the Ramones had been, at their peak 20 years later, whether or not they would have been, aping ABBA rather than girl groups and Spectre and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure they would have been,
Yeah. And yet, because they were who they were, it would come out as the Ramones. They couldn't help that, it seems.
Yeah.
Just as your music comes out ultimately as the Vaccines, whatever ingredients you put in, you still create this amazing Vaccine.
Try as we may.
I hope so.
People's Republic of Desire is the next stop in our tour of Love City. Where's this located?
So I suppose this is this is probably taking place, well, I suppose all over really. This is a kind of, overarching theme. And I suppose once you get to this point in the record, you're maybe potentially covering old ground. But I did see this documentary, People's Republic of Desire, which I'd recommend anyone to watch. It was pretty amazing, interesting film, and I just so I stole that for the title.
What's the film about?
I mean it's I don't know if a 2-minute blurb will do a much better job than the lyrics. I'm very proud of the lyrics on this song, but again, it's actually one of my favorite songs, and definitely one that we'll be playing live as well.
We're up to the 11th song on the new album Back in Love City. Freddie and Justin are connected to us, giving us the lowdown on the various different songs. What can you tell us about Savage? Those are some brutal sounding guitar stabs, I think, on this.
Yeah, I think a couple of times on this record, I was just buying a new piece of equipment, and it's funny because I heard recently that the Brian Eno would do the same thing. He would kind of they he'd go into a studio that someone else was using and not touch any of the equipment, and then run the tape he was using through that board just to see what it would sound like if you turned the whole thing on its head. So I quite, not comparing myself to Brian, it's just interesting, but I like often getting a guitar pedal out the box and then not touching it and just leaving it whatever it was and seeing what comes out. I think I plugged something in on this or something else, and it just, that riff, it just sounded like a kind of sci-fi March of the Empire or something. And sent it to Justin, and you detuned the guitar, didn't you? They made it even kind of dirtier, and
yeah. I think writing in the vaccines has always been, a solitary pursuit, and we've tried in the past to kind of, all get in a room together and start something on the day and finish something on the day, and it's never really worked for whatever reason. And so, it was quite nice for Freddie and I to essentially be able to write songs together on this record by him sending me stuff, and then, me taking it to the next sort of phase, and within the band, and then with a couple of friends who we use as collaborators and stuff, just sort of like sending stuff on and things kind of coming back and forth. And it meant that we were able to write songs together without, I guess, like, the pressure of getting something done in the day. And we found like it was quite a healthy and fun way of working. And there are a couple of like melodies on the record, where I just started singing the little guitar hook that Freddie had sent me and stuff. So that was a new way of working and a fun way of working.
And when you went to Texas, did you have it all ready? Did you have the songs ready to record, or did you get involved in writing more material when you were there?
No, they were all done and ready to record, and with the exception of a couple that were really like pulled apart and put back together, I think they were pretty.
We didn't have much.
When we got there.
Much wiggle room, really. I think we were there for 13 days and we had 12 recording days, and we recorded, I think, 13 songs or something. I don't know. Like, so that's not exactly.
Yeah, it was mad. We actually worked we worked pretty quickly. I think about, when I think back to that time, I sort of picture us having been there for months on end, because we never really ever left. But yeah, we got an incredible amount done in quite a short space of time, just because we couldn't afford to be there for any longer. And actually, when the pandemic hit, we were able to take a bit of time and like cross a few T's and dot a few I's and take things a little bit further. But essentially, we went there pretty well rehearsed and pretty well drilled, ready to go. And we came out having done pretty much everything we wanted to do.
Yeah, we had to work like quite aggressively in shifts. It was kind of like, as soon as drums and bass were done, we had to get the guitar, and then we had to do something, for 12 hours a day, non-stop.
I think that's one of my favorite things actually about working in a residential studio is it's a fully immersive experience. I think that if you're working in London or whatever, there's always, someone's always got a reason to turn up late or to leave early or whatever. But when you're somewhere completely separated and detached from everyday life, then there really is nothing else to do other than eat, sleep, and work. And so you really get into a rhythm, and it's pretty addictive actually.
Heartland is the next song, and is this about the ongoing love affair between yourselves and America?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose growing up, much like most of us, I was pretty drunk on, the diet of American pop culture that was like constantly fed to us, and I was obsessed. I was obsessed with the idea. I didn't go there till I was 18, and I was just obsessed with it. Like every, all my references in films and movies and books and skateboard videos or whatever it may be, were all from this like, dreamland over the other side of the world, and America is an amazing place, but it's also a place of extremes, and this song is, I suppose, less about a comment of where America is now and more about where I thought it was when I was a kid. It's written from the sort of perspective of a 13, 14-year-old boy who all he wanted to do was like go to a timeshare in Florida or something. I don't know.
That's the dream.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. But also, I mean, the very title, Heartland, Heartland rock, is a kind of one of the many musical identities that America has, and it's something that, in a way, has informed rock and roll for the last kind of 30 years. Because it becomes one of the essences of it. And it's something that people turn to and tap into sometimes, whether they're from America or not. And
totally. And I think there's, it's definitely, this song is obviously very much aware of that heritage and that lineage and stuff. But it was also a conscious decision to call it Heartland rather than Heartland. I liked the idea of, Heartland being this almost, it could even be like a theme park within the city of, like, or like a casino or whatever it may be, like within the world. And I suppose there's a bit more, it's slightly more playful maybe. But yeah, totally.
I really enjoyed recording of this because I think the lyrics are absolutely amazing, and I really loved watching them kind of develop. And I don't think there was anyone in the team, like band, producer, there was no one in the team that was actually American. And so it was quite, it was a time, obviously, when we recorded this, it was still kind of trans-America, and it was, but we all have our separate love affairs with American culture, and it was a really great thing to be in Texas, kind of celebrating the better parts of it, and kind of celebrating its influence, and yeah, I think
it was funny, really, because like Freddie says, none of us are American, but we were all in America, and it was, this song is intentionally, I would say, apolitical rather than political, but you were aware of your surroundings. The town Sonic Ranch is in was where Trump's internment camps were. It's where kids were being separated from their parents a year previous, I should say, not while we were there, but and as Freddie said, the wall ran through the property, so you were sort of like aware of this stuff. But like I said, it was more. The song is more, the song is more about what I thought America was more than what I think it is now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That is the penultimate track from the brand new album Back in Love City, which Justin and Freddie have been dissecting for us tonight, telling us about all the different songs on it. And you end the album with Pink Water Pistols, and you actually slow the pace for pretty much the first time on the record. We get to calm down now.
Yeah, finally.
Calm down.
Again, much the same as Love City. I think the second this song was written, we knew we wanted to kind of bookend the record and end the record, maybe because of its pace, but also I think because of its sound and its sentiment. This is an example of where Freddie had sent like a melody, and I'd actually had these finished lyrics, which is sort of like a trick I'd learned making the Halloween's record last year, or the year before, sorry. And I'd kind of been waiting for the right music to put them to. And Freddie sent this guitar sort of melody, which I started singing for the verse. And then Tim and I had actually written another song a couple of months before, and it felt like the mid-late was perfect. And then there was like another song that I'd been working on that felt like it was like the perfect chorus, where all these lyrics that I'd finished kind of fitted perfectly like onto these different sections of music. So Pink Water Pistols is kind of like an amalgamation of three songs that sort of like came together perfectly, and it wasn't necessarily the easiest song to begin with, but then it sort of really like all of a sudden just completely found its feet and like presented itself. And yeah, there's some lyrics on this song which I'm super proud of, and I just think, yeah, it's a nice kind of pretty calm, hopeful way, I hope, to end the record. And
what's the song about, do you think?
Well, again, I think that the song will probably, I think the lyrics would probably do a better job of explaining that than I will now, kind of rambling at you. But, there's what just to zoom out a sec, one thing I will say is that as I've got older, I think I've become less specific and more maybe like mood based when I'm writing. So, I think for the first kind of 5-6 years of writing songs and making records, you know, something would happen to me in the pub or on the street, or, you know, in a relationship or whatever it may be. And then I'd wait 5 minutes, and then I'd go home and I'd, you know, write a song about what just happened. Whereas I feel like I write from a much more kind of like overarching viewpoint, if that makes sense. So I'll be like, oh, I'll take that little bit of that experience there, and I'll take that little bit of that feeling there, and then that all kind of makes sense together, and then people can make of it what they will. And so really the song is about different things and different times and different places at different points throughout the song. And in some ways I kind of like that, because it takes you on much more of a journey.
Yeah, totally. It's been great to talk to you, and great to find out about the new record. 5 albums in, The Vaccines, you know, it's so exciting. And you know, I think that's an achievement in itself, just to get to this place.
I think so. Very proud of everything. Absolutely. Very proud of everything we've achieved.
And it's only just begun, you know.
So.
Radio X.